For most young guards, getting acclimated to the NBA as a rookie can be difficult for a variety of reasons. Keyonte George experienced that this past year with the Jazz, as his rookie season had both highs and lows. While there were some encouraging flashes, there were also aspects George can work on to build towards the future. I'm going to take a deeper dive into his offensive game and show where George impressed, but also highlight some things he can work on to take his game to the next level. George entered the NBA with the reputation as a scorer, and there were certainly flashes of this as a rookie, though understandably, the game-to-game results were a bit erratic. One area where he really demonstrated this was on runners. George ranked in the 75th percentile on these shots, where he made more than 50% of his 113 attempts. In the process, he showed he could get to these shots in a variety of ways. This example is your more traditional pick and roll, though as George uses a screen, look at how decisively Walker Kessler rolls to the rim here. That puts the opposing center in a bind, as if he rotates towards George, you're looking at the threat of a potential lob. George realizes this and stops on a dime to hit the open floater in the paint. George also showed he can get into these shots when playing off the ball. Here he starts as the ball handler, but as he receives it back after the initial pass, look how decisive George is here. The moment he catches the ball, he's already going downhill. He creates some separation with the gather on the Euro step and finishes through contact. George averaged around 7 drives a game per the NBA's player tracking data and showed the ability to score and draw fouls doing so. As a rookie, he averaged more free throws per game off drives than notable guards such as Kyrie Irving, Stephen Curry, and Tyrese Halliburton. George operated out of pick and roll frequently as a rookie, and while his efficiency can improve, he showed encouraging flashes creating for himself out of the action. Here the Jazz are running high pick and roll with Lauri Markkanen as the screener, though in this instance, George goes away from the pick and creates space. As he gets downhill, Jaime Jaquez is in a bind defensively. If he fully commits to George, that can lead to a kickout to what would be an open shooter. But there's nobody protecting the rim. George gets him with a very quick pass fake, and it leads to an uncontested finger roll layup. George is also dangerous in pick and roll due to his ability to shoot off the dribble. This past season, he performed well above league average, knocking down 36% of his three-point attempts off the bounce. Here George is running left side pick and roll. Though look at what happens as John Collins rolls to the basket. Collins draws Clint Capella, but DeAndre Hunter stumbles just for a brief second, but doing so gives George just enough space and timing to get into his shot, and he knocks down the three. As a rookie, George showed some impressive passing flashes and the ability to create for teammates out of pick and roll. Here the Jazz run high pick and roll, but after using the Walker Kessler screen, George now has 2 defenders on him as he gets downhill. While the pass isn't flashy, George does a nice job of waiting for Kessler to roll and finds him for an easy dunk. This is another example of high pick and roll with Kessler as the screener. Though as George gets downhill, the defense is in a bind. George has enough space to take one of the floaters he converts at a high clip, but also has an open teammate in the right corner whose defender has a foot in the paint to help on George. George deceives him just enough to fire out a pass to the right corner, which makes for a tough closeout and leads to an open three. If you watch American football, you know that early on there's an adjustment period for rookie quarterbacks to know what windows are open to throw into at the next level. That's also an adjustment for rookie guards, and George was no exception. Here George quickly operates out of the pick and roll. Though as Walker Kessler rolls to the rim, this looks like a potential advantage. The Jazz have a rolling Kessler and Kelly Olynyk open in the corner, and the Pacers only have one defender who can defend both. While the pass to Kessler makes sense, George throws it into a spot where the opposing defender could easily jump the passing lane for a steal. Here's another example of pick and roll where George gets downhill as an opposing center in Daniel Gafford is switched onto him. Though with that switch, George is likely assuming this could lead to an easy alley-oop for a rolling John Collins. While the thought does make sense, he has to account for the length and closing speed of opposing defenders. George throws the lob pass, and PJ Washington breaks it up for a steal. While some of these turnovers can be frustrating to watch as a fan, these are typical growing pains for young guards, so I'd expect George to grow in this regard with more in-game reps. Given George's touch on floaters and shooting off the dribble, the most surprising thing to me this past season was how much he struggled shooting off the catch. While it wasn't asked of him a ton, George knocked down just 31% of his attempts from deep off the catch. Most surprisingly, he knocked down just 32% of those attempts that were considered unguarded. While that's alarming, I'm expecting George to make a leap in that regard, given the shooting touch he displays in other aspects of his game. He's also able to attack closeouts, so becoming more respectable shooting off the catch would only make him more dangerous in that regard. So what should be expected of George in year 2? I'm expecting we see a boost in his shooting efficiency for various reasons. The touch he shows on floaters and his ability to shoot off the dribble suggests he should be much better shooting off the catch. On top of that, George also shows a knack for getting to the free throw line when driving downhill, which should add at least a few points per game. The turnovers can be common for young guards, though George does show some intriguing anticipation as a passer. That makes me think as the game slows down for him, the turnovers will eventually decline. The Jazz do have a lot of young talent, and in a grueling Western Conference, this is more of a year to experiment with their young players. George looks like he's capable of being a dangerous scorer. Now we just have to see if he can be the Jazz's point guard of the present and future. If you made it this far, thank you, and if you enjoyed the video, don't hesitate to like and subscribe to stay up to date on my latest basketball analysis.